So now our next slot is with Roman. Roman is speaking with us from Austria. And we are right on time because we had planned to have the first hour a bit at looking at advocacy on migration, and the second hour would start right now on 3 areas of a bit of entrepreneurship approach and planning, constructive planning when engaging in advocacy and campaigning. Roman, are you there?
I am here and I'm in the process of sharing my screen.
While Roman shares the screen, I would like to invite all the participants that if you have any questions, you can write them in the chat. We are monitoring the chat regularly here. Also, I have included some links to some of the projects that we are mentioning. Nevertheless, there is also my email there. If you need any other clarifications, feel free to send us an email. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, shall I begin?
Yes.
Yeah. So basically, this is a bit of a presentation about how we can clarify our ideas and how we can apply them maybe to some social topics. So first of all, if you have an idea, as we can follow 3 very simple steps. First of all, we define the goals. So what are we planning to achieve with this? Following that, we work on the structure. So the plan for achieving these goals. And finally, we evaluate the results of what did we learn, how can this be improved, and how can we optimize this in the future. And here we have a kind of canvas which you can use to help you work for this. So this is based on the business model canvas, but more applicable to campaigning and advocacy as well. So as you can see, we have the partners, basically whose cooperation is required, who are the relevant partners that are being affected, what motivates the partners. We have the activities, which kind of outlines what is needed to reach our objectives and what channels are going to be used. For example, social media or online advertising, or maybe you're doing a TV campaign. Of course, everything begins with the objectives. That is, what is the problem that we're facing? What are we trying to achieve? And what kind of solutions and implications this brings. The resources, so what is required to bring this to life and how these resources can be acquired. And then, of course, the audience. So who is targeted? Again, who is affected? And how is this activity valuable to our audience? Finally, you have the costs and the outcomes. Of course, we have to consider how much these activities are going to cost us, how much the research is going to cost us, and whether there are any ways that these costs can be lowered as well. And the outcomes, like I mentioned previously, these are our results. This is where we evaluate whether the problem has been solved or whether the goal that we were trying to achieve has been reached, and what can also be improved in future iterations if we decide to go with more campaign or advocacy initiatives. Here's an example that we can go through very quickly. So this is not necessarily migration related, but rather climate change. So this is an activity, or rather campaign, done by the World Overshoot Organization. So the idea is that, or rather the background is that every year there's a specific date where we reach or we consume the resources available for that year. So for example, in 2020, in August 20th, we have used all the capacity the Earth had available for the year. So everything else that we're using, the electricity, the water, the waste, the food, the CO2 that's being emitted into the environment, that's all kind of going beyond what the Earth is able to produce sustainably. So what they did was they came up with a campaign asking people to move the date, as you can see in the hashtag. So there's a couple of activities that they have, such as having a footprint calculator where you can find out how much CO2 you're actually emitting yourself. They also cooperate with schools and other partners, global organizations. etc., etc. So to give you an example, within the canvas, the partners for this particular project are the Global Footprint Network, you have the UN Environment Program, and like I mentioned, you have schools and teachers. So we're trying to educate, or rather they're trying to educate future generations as well. Activities have included social media, the footprint calculator, among others. Resources are measurement tools and marketing. The audience is including policymakers, students, also local and international communities where this is being advertised. And as mentioned in the beginning, the objectives are including awareness about sustainability, the visibility of the ecological impact that our human activity has, as well as reduction of non-renewable resources. With respect to costs, some of the costs that this organization had to take into consideration is sustaining the servers, sustaining personnel, because of course somebody needs to take care of all these initiatives, needs to execute them. Also the costs of research and raising funds, as well as marketing costs. So although this is an NGO, they do have costs to push their agenda towards the public, and marketing is necessary for that purpose. And the outcomes of this campaigning is increased awareness amongst the general public about how Earth's resources are being used, about what can be done to decrease them, about people's personal impact on the Earth's ecosystem. And hopefully they manage to decrease the waste as well as have better policies for future generations. So moving on, here are a couple of examples of how we can take action on a local scale. So there's basically very simple things that can be done. They should be wide-reaching and as well cost-effective. So if we're talking about a local council, of course the costs are limited, but we want to reach as wide an audience as possible, but also we want to keep it simple without without increasing the cognitive load on our communities. So here's a very good example. This was done in Australia and UK, I believe. I'm sure this is being rolled out in a few other places. And the idea here is basically, how can we decrease littering? So this was done on a local scale. And as you can see, it's sort of a voting mechanism, asking smokers who's the best player in the world, whether it's Ronaldo or Messi. So instead of throwing your cigarette butt on the ground, which can have many negative effects, like eyesore, it's polluting, of course, and it can even lead to fires. In this way, people are encouraged to actually not to litter, and they're sort of having a little bit of a fun, engaging way to decide who is a better football player. And as you can see, the design is very simple. This has proved to be extremely effective. In fact, a lot of people were using this, and the rates of littering have gone down significantly. This is very cost effective and also very easily accessible, and does not involve a lot of operations behind it. Another example is coming from Starbucks. So again, related to recycling, but similar concepts can be used, of course, in other areas. As you can see, it's very clearly communicated which bin belongs where, and you can see what can go into the recycling bin, what is going into the landfill. Again, there is a little bit of an element of encouragement to reduce the waste going to the landfill and rather encourage recycling, but also educate people about where their waste is going and how much waste is being produced by what. Of course, this is also beneficial on a local scale. Again, very low cost and very easy to actualize. And finally, we have a little bit of a more related example to migration. So as you can see, this is this was a boat purchased by private organization and painted by a graffiti or street artist named Banksy, who is fairly well known. And basically this way, they attempted to raise awareness about the issues of migration in the Mediterranean basin, as well as actually do something rather than just raise awareness, but rather have a little bit of a more aggressive and more active approach where they use this boat to actually rescue people who are in need. So, like I said, the main objective was, of course, raising awareness, but also saving people. And one of the more important parts that's kind of part of their agenda is about contribution to your local community and contribution to the society as a whole. And they're highlighting that people should speak up against racism, join movements for climate justice, and take any kind of action that defends global respect for all forms of life, whether they're near or far. So going beyond your neighborhood, but rather looking at the impact that these activities have also on a larger scale. So besides just raising awareness, they're of course collaborating between artists and activists. They're encouraging donations and private funding, as well as educating people and reaching out within their communities. So this is a little bit of a larger scale example, but it's using exactly the same principles, and this is highly effective because this is not something that that can be easily overlooked, especially if there's a crisis going on. And to close off, as we mentioned in the beginning, you should begin with your goal. So what is the very specific target that you're aiming to achieve? The structure, how you're going to achieve this, and the Canvas can help you in that, and your results. So was this effective? How can this be better? Can this be optimized? And the future steps for following campaigns. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Roman. I wonder if you would share later, maybe even you send it in the chat, the canvas, because later we will speak of tools. However, we did not want to overlap with what you had prepared. So we went to other kinds of tools, but I'm sure that the canvas would help.
Yeah, absolutely.
And some of us or all of us might have seen a business canvas before, but this would be a bit of a nice adaptation of it by your creative self. Okay. Thank you, Roman.
Thanks.
Any questions, anybody? No, in case I see that some comments coming up.